Hi, welcome back. And this time we're going to go to the third episode of the series where we're going to talk about Bandra, the area there, St. Andrews, and all the villages around. And these have their own distinctive stories and flavors. And of course, our authority is Nikhil. Please.
So, Bhaskar, it's interesting that you say it's got its own flavors and stories. And, every time you talk to someone in Bandra, even today, they say that it's got a different vibe than
Yes.
Bombay. Originally, they've been one of the prettiest areas of Bombay. They've been urban gauthans that we say. Gauthans means a place of a village. So they're urban villages in a sense. So you've got Ranwar, you've got Pali, you've got Chimbai. Ranwar was a farming village. Pali Village was a farming village,
Okay.
while Chimbai was, because it was near the coast, it was more of a Koli village. So you had all these villages near the coast.
Okay.
So the real estate of Bandra has grown in quite the opposite way. You had all these villages around the coast. So the real estate property around the late 1800s and early 1900s, it was more expensive to live near the railway stations than to live at the coast.
Wish I bought some land then.
Absolutely, because Carter Road and all came much later. But
Yes.
essentially, it was all these Koli villages and these farming villages that was there. Have you ever been to Ranwar?
No, I don't. Maybe I've been there. I didn't even know that there was a place called Ranwar. Thanks to you.
Yes, so Ranwar is really, really pretty. And, the younger generation knows Ranwar much more than the older generation, because now it's the place where all the youngsters go to. And when you walk around Ranwar, you'll realize that the streetscapes are very narrow, and you're suddenly transformed in a completely different area of the city. The reason is that when these houses were built, and these houses we're talking about being built in the 1500s and 1600s, and when these houses were built at that time, they were all again vernacular houses. We've spoken about vernacular in the earlier episodes. There were also a lot of Indo-Portuguese houses, because of course there was Portuguese that were ruling Bombay at that time. But essentially they were all farmers, and there was no security in that area. So what they did was they actually built houses very close to each other. So all these houses had very tiny lanes for two reasons. One was security, and the other one was shade. So if you've seen, whenever you go to an old city in India, you'd see that most of the streetscapes of these old cities in Bombay are very narrow.
Narrow.
And say you go to Ahmedabad, you go to Rajasthan, you go to even Old Delhi, and you'll see that all of them have these overhang balconies that are there. And when you go there today, you feel that they're very narrow streets. But Bombay, the architecture of Bombay has been quite intelligent. And the reason is that you have narrow streets is because of shade. So every time there's a balcony on the top and you're walking through these villages or through the older parts of Bombay, you'll always get shade when you're walking by.
Very clever.
So every time, and on these walks, you realize that when you're walking on the main roads of Bandra, you'll realize that there's so much sun. And the minute you turn left or right into the village, and suddenly there's a whiff of a breeze, or there's shade that's happening because of these narrow streets. Also, the Koli community had a thought that every time their son got married, the son would get a new house, and the house would be right next to the father's house. And which is why, even if the houses were, say, 200 years were a little far off, over a period of time, when the newer houses were built, these houses were built much closer to the father's house. And that is why they were also extremely closely built.
Okay.
But when the Portuguese came in, the people of these villages realized that they could now, build, they had European dreams as well. And then they started building G+1 houses. So all of them had a staircase now to go up, and then you had a pitched roof on the top. The best part about these houses is that you'll find that the staircases are all from outside. And it's a very intelligent thing that they did, because what happens is the minute you give a staircase from outside, you save a lot of space inside the house.
Correct.
So you have a ground floor, and then you have a staircase that you go up, but you go outside so that you're saving space inside your plot of land. And the staircase outside doesn't need to turn. So you're obviously saving a lot of space. So very ingenious method of
Plus, who's
design.
going where?
Who's going where? Correct. What it's done now is that it's really helped people who've had houses, because how things are changing now. Families have, they've got grandchildren now, and they've all moved out. And a lot of people who've lived in the villages want to rent out to earn more money. And this has really helped, because what they can do is they can either give the ground floor off or the first floor off to people to rent without really the
Upselling
tenant coming inside their
Yes.
house. But all of them have these lovely wooden staircases that you will take, and they have these lovely balustrades that you will see. And across all villages of Bandra, so you'll see Pali, and you'll see Ranwar, and you'll go to Chimbai, and you'll see these lovely Indo-Portuguese houses that are there, but true to be very vernacular. There's always a debate, though I'm saying Indo-Portuguese, the reason I'm saying Indo-Portuguese is that because they had a Portuguese, flavor to it, and ancestry
yes.
to it. But in a sense, they were all Indian with a few Portuguese details. Like if you see the balustrades, you'll see that a lot of Portuguese houses would have that balustrade on the staircase. One of the most beautiful parts of the house is the veranda, or we say the balcony that's there outside, from which we've got the word balcony.
Okay.
So that's a very Portuguese word. But when you walk around these villages, you'll see a lot of these uncles and aunts, maybe old, maybe young. They'll be sitting on the balcony, and there'll be a granite katta, that'll be there. That is actually built out of concrete from the land.
Okay.
And people can sit there and they'll be reading a newspaper with a little cup of tea or coffee
Okay.
right next to it. And this porch is something that becomes, it's like a fabric or like a space in between their house and the road, between the streetscape. A lot of activities happen in that area. So one is, of course, that people are sitting and reading. A lot of exchanges take place. So you'll find that when you go to these villages, you'll find a lot of people walking through and then talking to their uncle or aunt. People buying vegetables from that porch there. So in a sense, it becomes one of the most important things in that house.
And by part of social interaction.
Part of social interaction. So you don't, not like the houses that we have today.
Correct. We are isolated.
Yeah, if you're living even on the third floor of a building, you have no clue what your neighbor is doing.
Yeah.
You have no clue. You come out of your building and then go to work.
Correct.
Here, that balcony actually gives you a place to interact with your neighbors.
And everyone knows everyone, and they talk about it.
Absolutely. So that was one thing. There's a book that also says that there was a lady and a husband that came in to rent a place in Bandra, and she was pleasantly surprised to see a balcony, because the concept of a balcony or the concept of a terrace, a usable terrace, was never there in the city of Bombay before the buildings came up, because you always had a roof that always ended the building.
Correct.
So if there was a balcony, this couple was quite pleasantly surprised to see that they could actually hang their clothes somewhere to dry, because before that it was always just the window and the roof on the top. So these villages also changed the mindset of people, because they started having these innovative Portuguese kind of ideas that was there. You go inside the houses and you'll see that they have these lovely tiles. Today, a lot of interior designers and architects, including me, are passing it off as Spanish tiles, etc. But when you go to all these houses, you'll see that they've been existing for the last 100, 150
so hardly
years.
be Spanish about it.
Absolutely. And these tiles are actually European tiles that have been there in Bombay since the last maybe 200 years.
Yes.
And now getting popular because of Instagram. The villages of Bandra were always, you would know that you've come to a village when you saw a cross. So every village in Bandra has a cross, either at the start or at the end of the village. And the best way to know that you've entered a village is to see a cross.
Okay.
Why did these crosses come up? Is again because of the plague. So we've spoken briefly about the plague, but the plague really was like COVID, and everyone was worried about the plague. And some people put up their crosses outside their houses because they wanted to protect themselves from the plague. And some of them were thankful that when the plague passed, they realized that they've not been affected. So they were very thankful to God. And that is why they put up these crosses.
Yes.
And these crosses now become a part of vernacular architecture. You're walking through these tiny lanes, and you can actually visualize Europe when you're
yes.
Maybe not as clean as Europe, but it does seemingly be it is seemingly like Europe. And you're walking through these tiny streets, and then you'll suddenly come to a lovely little square that we call the Agna, and this square actually is where all the weddings used to happen, or where the entire village used to come together to celebrate a festival. And, these are all Gauthans, these are all Wadis. And usually Gauthans and Wadis have been similar in culture. Usually either it's been one community that's lived together, or there've been similar cultural people that have lived together. So Bhaskar, this was the villages of of Bandra, and
Okay.
of course there's a Salsette colony that's there, which had the advent of Art Deco in Bandra.
Mhm.
So we can talk about the Salsette colony, Marine Drive, and Shivaji Park, where all the Art Deco grew in the next episode.
Wow, that's a good idea. And thanks again.
Thank
Learning, as always.